Naofumi is a loser otaku who gets isekai'd into a magic world just to be labeled as the useless shield hero. But after a treacherous baddie frames him and makes him get exiled from the kingdom, he decides to level up to become the strongest hero and crack everyone who tried to downplay him. The day Naofumi landed in the isekai world, he found 3 other heroes with him: Motoyasu with his spear, Ren with his sword, and Itsuki with his bow. The summoners escorted all 4 heroes to meet King Melremark. The king then laid out the situation. Their new world was getting wrecked by waves of calamity, interdimensional portals that spat out monsters at random, and the 4 of them had been chosen to stop it. However, the catch was that they weren't strong enough yet to handle any of it, so the king promised to arrange volunteers to help them level up. Then a dozen adventurers showed up, and not a single one picked loser Fumi. Turns out that as the shield hero, he was the weakest among the heroes, so no one wanted to be on his party. However, at that moment, a beautiful baddie named Mine stepped forward to join his team, making Naofumi believe that his life as an isekai protagonist was finally starting. The king handed out small mountains of gold to each hero, giving the largest one to Naofumi since he was going on his own. Outside, he and Mine meet up, and Naofumi thanks her for showing up for him, so he decides that he will defend her no matter what. Mine then led him to a blacksmith named Erhard. However, when he tried to grab a sword, it flew right out of his hand since his shield hero status forbade him from using other weapons. He then bought an average coat while Mine almost forced him to buy the most expensive and elegant armor in the store with the gold the king gave him, casually promising to reward him later. On his first day of training, Naofumi squared off against Halloween monsters, and his combat limitations were painfully obvious, as it took him way longer than it should have to take one down. But the good news was that his shield could absorb monster remains and unlock new forms. Later that night, in an almost romantic dinner, she suggested sharing a glass of wine, but Naofumi said he doesn't drink, but promised to take her out on a date someday. He then went to his room, but before slept, he stashed some coins inside his shield, which was a smart move because the next morning, everything else was gone. And while he was trying to tell Mine what had happened, royal guards grabbed him and dragged him before the king and the other heroes. He tried to explain how he had been robbed, but Mine accused Naofumi of attempting to assault her, shocking everyone. The king declared the offense punishable by death, and nobody in that room had any interest in hearing Naofumi's side of things. As Mine shot him smug looks from across the room, Naofumi connected the dots. He saw Motoyasu with the coat he bought for himself the previous day, and saw Mine with her shining and elegant armor, and understood he had been set up from the start, as he only chose to join him to rip him off of all he had. When he demanded proof, a knight conveniently produced a torn piece of clothing, claiming it had been found in his room. Naofumi shot back that it had not been there when he woke up, but nobody cared. Backed into a corner, he demanded to be sent back home, only for the king to shut that down too. Heroes could only be returned after the waves of calamity were stopped. With nothing left to lose, Naofumi shook off the guards and stormed out of the castle. Wandering with no destination, Naofumi ran into Erhard, the blacksmith who had equipped him earlier. The man raised his fist like he was about to throw hands, but something in Naofumi's expression made him stop. Instead, Erhard handed him some clearance armor and told him to pay it back whenever he could. Burning with rage and nowhere to direct it, Naofumi headed out to the fields and took his frustration out on the innocent Halloween monsters. The next day, he gathered the monster remains from his rampage and headed to a merchant to sell them. When the merchant tried to lowball him, Naofumi pulled back his coat to reveal several live balloon creatures and tortured the merchant until a fair deal was reached. That became his standard approach, using whatever leverage he had to secure reasonable trades. But along the way, Naofumi noticed something unsettling. He had completely lost his sense of taste since the day of the false accusations. 2 weeks and 2 more level ups later, he was stuck in a frustrating loop. Without enough offensive power, he couldn't take down stronger monsters to level up. However, one night, a little strange man appeared with an unusual proposition. Rather than continuing to deal with unreliable allies who could betray him at any moment, what Naofumi actually needed was someone magically bound to his service. The odd little man turned out to be a slave trader, running his operation out of a large tent packed with caged beings. As Naofumi looked through the options, he spotted a small, raccoon-like, sick demi-human tucked away in one of the cages. The trader first tried to push a high-level werewolf-type beastman on him, but the price tag was more than the brokey could afford. He looked at more options and finally settled on Raftalia, the sickly demi-human girl he had noticed earlier. Inside the merchant's room, he drew a sigil across her chest, and her status appeared in his party screen. Before they left, Naofumi asked for her name, and she called her name Raftalia. Back at the blacksmith shop, Naofumi handed over 6 silvers for a weapon and told Raftalia to draw her knife at the Halloween monsters hiding underneath him. She stood there, too scared to move, so he activated her curse. She rushed forward and stabbed it. She blew the Halloween monster wide open and earned her first XP. As she sat on the floor catching her breath, he told her that she was going to be his sword while he protected her. Later that day, they went back to farming Halloween monsters, and once they finished, Naofumi's shield started leveling up. Raftalia asked who he was, and he told her he was the shield hero. This immediately pulls up a memory of her family asking her which hero was her favorite, and when she mentioned the shield hero, they were glad, because he was the only one who had ever been known to treat demi-humans with kindness. She asked for his actual name, and he told her it was Naofumi, then handed her medicine for her illness. That night, while Naofumi kept watch, Raphtalia suffered a nightmare in her sleep. She was back on the day a three-headed monster tore through her family. Her parents threw her into the ocean to keep her safe before the beast swallowed them. She woke up screaming their names, and Naofumi pulled her close and held her until she stopped shaking. The following morning, the pharmacist told Naofumi he would make far more money producing medicine than selling raw herbs. So Naofumi asked to borrow his tools on the spot. During an adventure a few days later, a rabbit crossed their path, and Naofumi told Raphtalia to stab it. She refused, unwilling to watch it bleed, so he activated the curse and told her plainly that if she could not attack, he could not afford to keep looking after her, and that the waves coming for this world would destroy everything in it. The moment she heard that he was actually working to stop the waves, her resolve locked in. She charged the rabbit and finished it in a single hit, then told him that she was not going to stay weak and that she would do anything to remain by his side. Back at the weapons shop that evening, Naofumi decided she needed a bigger sword for what was ahead. The blacksmith pulled out a short iron sword and said it was a perfect fit for her. Naofumi glanced at his funds and realized he was bleeding money fast, so he asked if there were any villages nearby where they could earn quick coin. The smith pointed them toward the nearest village and mentioned that fast, slightly questionable work was available there. At the village, they headed into a cave tunnel, and while they walked, Raphtalia asked what she should even call him. He told her he did not care, so she could pick whatever she wanted. They pushed deeper inside, and Naofumi started hammering some precious crystals. When he finished and turned around, he found Raphtalia shivering. Then a two-headed monster crawled out of the dark, and the moment she saw it, every drop of color left her face. It looked exactly like the three-headed beast that had destroyed her family, and the memories came crashing back all at once. The creatures lunged at her, but Naofumi dove in and yanked her out of the way. As they climbed back up, she told him what that monster had done to her family, and he understood immediately why she cried out in her sleep every single night. Before they could breathe, the beast surfaced again. He told her that if they could push their XP high enough and took it down, she would have her chance to avenge her parents, and they would also be stopping it from doing the same thing to someone else's family. Then he charged straight at it. He blocked one head with his shield, and the second one drove its teeth into his shoulder. With things falling apart fast, he yelled at Raphtalia to move, but she was completely frozen where she stood. Running out of options, he told her to run, that she would be free once he was gone. But that snapped something open in her. She remembered her parents being torn apart right in front of her while protecting her, and she remembered every moment since then that Naofumi had kept her alive and looked out for her. Afraid of wandering alone for the rest of her life, she threw herself forward and drove her blade into one of the heads, but the monster flung her across the cave. The other head locked onto her, and Naofumi launched his shield to cover her. She then used the opening, drove her sword straight through its heart, and the beast dropped dead. They gained XP, and Raphtalia rushed over and grabbed onto him, crying with relief as he let her hold on. 2 weeks of monster hunting later, things were looking very different for the duo. Naofumi had been busy feeding his shield the leftover bits of every creature they put down, and the thing had responded by unlocking a whole parade of new abilities. Raphtalia, on the other hand, had gone through a change that had nothing to do with shields. She had matured into a young woman practically overnight, which was the kind of thing a normal person would notice, but Naofumi didn't because he was an idiot. After a porcupine-type monster left him roughed up, they swung by Erhard's shop for an armor upgrade, and the blacksmith noticed Raphtalia's growth immediately and started to admire her like he was Epstein's distant cousin. Naofumi, meanwhile, stood there completely unbothered, casually assuming that anyone who commented on her appearance must just have strange taste, and this made Raphtalia look like she wanted to fold him in half. Rather than picking from whatever was already on the shelf, they put in a custom order and headed back after dinner. Naofumi continued treating Raphtalia like she was still the small little brat he had first met, and every second of it chipped away at her patience. Once the barbarian armor was ready, Naofumi started turning the issue of the next wave over in his head. The timing and location were a complete mystery to him, until Erhard explained the Dragon's Era Hourglass, a giant countdown clock that not only tracked the next wave but also teleported the heroes straight to it. Naofumi absorbed this information with the energy of a man who was furious he had not been told sooner, and then they marched off to the tower to check if Erhard was capping or spitting facts. The tower visit turned into an instant headache as the other three heroes, Motoyasu, Ren, and Itsuki, appeared. Motoyasu greeted the situation by flirting shamelessly with Raphtalia while slipping little digs at Naofumi. Naofumi had heard enough within about 30 seconds and immediately grabbed Raphtalia and walked out, deciding that preparing for the wave was a far better use of his energy than standing there listening to that. Meanwhile, Raphtalia was in the dark of what was going on, and when she asked Naofumi, he didn't answer. Right before the wave hit, Raphtalia pulled Naofumi aside and said everything she had been holding in her chest. She told him how grateful she was, pledged to follow him no matter what came next, and meant every word of it. The moment the last grain of sand dropped through the dragon hourglass, Naofumi and Raphtalia were dropped just outside Loot Village. One look at the place confirmed the worst. The villagers had not evacuated, the knights were nowhere close to arriving in time, and a wall of undead and monster bees was already on its way. Naofumi stared at the situation, quickly did the math, and accepted that the village was going to burn unless the two of them did something about it right now. He had no interest in chasing a boss while civilians got chewed up behind him, so they scrapped the traditional hero playbook and planted themselves on the front line. Raphtalia pushed through the panic to get people moving towards safety, while Naofumi ran the opposite direction, dragging as many monsters after him as he could. In a moment, he sent a burning guard tower crashing down directly onto the advancing horde. The villagers who saw it happen stopped running long enough to turn around, and they came back to stand beside him, saying they would fight with him. Then the Knights of Melremark finally showed up, which should have been a good thing, but it was not. Instead of targeting the monsters, they started firebombing the area with the kind of reckless accuracy that suggested they had not checked whether any civilians were still in the blast zone. Raphtalia was 2 seconds away from making the captain regret his career choices, and only the vice captain stepping in prevented that conversation from ending badly. Naofumi got through to them just enough to redirect their firepower toward the actual monsters, but the senior knights sneered and headed off to assist the other heroes. However, the vice captain and a handful of lower-ranking soldiers stayed behind to assist. Eventually, the other heroes wrapped up their side of things by taking down the wave's boss, a chimera, and the moment it dropped, the wave stopped and the crisis folded, and the greedy losers immediately set off to collect their praise and reward money. Meanwhile, back at the village, the people Naofumi had protected gathered around him to genuinely thank him for saving them, but Naofumi didn't do well with compliments and told them to leave. He thought he was no hero since he didn't help them because he loved them anyway. Meanwhile, Raphtalia stood quietly for a moment before asking the question that had been sitting in her throat the whole time. She had lost everything to the first wave when she was small, and she needed to know if at least some of the children in that village had been spared the same fate. Naofumi replied yes, and placed a hand on her head, and like that, everything she had been holding together came apart as she broke down in tears. That night, the castle was lit with celebration as everyone toasted their victory against the waves. Naofumi stood in the corner looking like a man attending his own funeral, and he would not have shown up at all if not for the cash reward the king had dangled in front of the heroes. Across the hall, Motoyasu tried to slide up to Raphtalia, but Mine intercepted him and began whispering what was clearly the most diabolical plan her tiny scheming brain had ever cooked up. Raphtalia pushed some food in Naofumi's direction, but he looked at it like it had personally wronged him, and told her he would rather drink his piss. Before he could wallow deeper in his misery, a new ability flashed across his shield that could teleport both of them over to the site of the wave's invasion. Raphtalia came right back with the food, and Motoyasu watched from across the room with his jealousy meter rising by the second. Fed up, Motoyasu slapped his glove across the floor and challenged Naofumi to a duel. His whole pitch was that Raphtalia was a slave, and that he had arrived to set her free, though everyone with 2 brain cells could see he just wanted her to swap teams. Naofumi pointed out that owning a slave was perfectly legal and turned to walk away. That lasted about 3 seconds before a knight stepped into his path, and the king commanded him to accept the challenge. Raphtalia tried speaking up, telling anyone who would listen that she followed Naofumi of her own free will. A knight promptly covered her mouth, and the king declared she had been brainwashed. Naofumi tried to step forward, but a ring of swords convinced him to stay put. That night before the duel, he tried grabbing a weapon for extra firepower, but the system shocked him and reminded him firmly that unassigned weapons were off the table. As both men faced off, Motoyasu advised Naofumi to surrender before things got ugly. But Naofumi was not about to let his chick go. Motoyasu launched himself forward, ramming Naofumi again and again, and came away with absolutely nothing to show for it. Naofumi told him to his face that his shield was untouchable. Motoyasu, deeply offended by reality, activated his Chaos Spear and unleashed a relentless storm of attacks until he finally found a gap and sliced Naofumi's arm. Naofumi shook it off and charged straight back, landing a punch right in the gut. Then he revealed a collection of Halloween monsters latched onto his body and threatened to bite Motoyasu's meat off. Since his shield gave him no offensive moves, he had turned these creatures into his weapons, and they were doing their job beautifully. Motoyasu wound up for a powerful finishing blow, but Naofumi blocked it clean and sent him flying with a 2-headed dog shield. He then launched an airstrike shield that boxed Motoyasu inside a shield prison. Seeing this, the crowd called Naofumi a coward, so he released Motoyasu and told him to surrender. However, Motoyasu refused, and just as Naofumi loaded up another attack, a gust of wind smashed into him from nowhere. He turned to find Mine had used her magic on him. He wanted to go after her immediately, but Motoyasu's lightning spear cracked straight through his shield and dropped him to the ground. Following this, Motoyasu declared himself the winner and started to leave, but Naofumi accused him of cheating, revealing that Mine had attacked him from behind, but the crowd said absolutely nothing. Then the king walked up and handed Motoyasu his congratulations, and in that same moment, Naofumi finally connected the dots. Mine was the princess. The whole thing had been a setup because the king wanted his daughter with Motoyasu, and Naofumi had been the obstacle from the very beginning. They had dragged him into their world against his will, treated him like a criminal, and stood there pretending they had done nothing wrong. A minister announced that Raphtalia would be freed from her slave contract. Soldiers pulled forward her crest and poured a potion over it until the mark disappeared. His system immediately confirmed it that his contract with her was gone, and Naofumi became very angry with his miserable life. He hurled his shield as far as his arm could manage, but it teleported straight back onto onto him like it was mocking him. He screamed everything he felt about their world, and in that moment of pure, unfiltered rage, his curse series activated. Meanwhile, Raphtalia walked up to Motoyasu and smacked him, asking plainly why he had inserted himself into something that had nothing to do with him. She told him Naofumi was a good master and had only used her curse mark when she was frozen with fear. Mine raised her hand at Raphtalia, but Itsuki and Ren walked in right at that moment, and Ren demanded to know why Mine had cheated. Itsuki laid it out plainly that Naofumi had won the duel, but Mine attacked him from behind. Mine suggested everyone had imagined it, since the crowd was not confirming anything, but Ren told her that the crowd had stayed quiet because of their fear of the king. Raphtalia walked back to Naofumi and told him she was still the same person she had always been, but he told her to leave. She told him she believed in him regardless and reached out to touch him, but he pushed her away. However, Raphtalia was not going anywhere. She told him she had promised to stay by his side, and she intended to keep that promise. Naofumi grabbed at his shield and tried to tear it off, but she stopped him and reminded him that the shield was the very thing that had kept the village from being wiped off the map. He told her he was not a good person, and that saving the village had never been his intention, but she held onto him anyway and told him she could see right through the act. She told him she was his sword and that she would follow him no matter where he went, and those words landed somewhere deep in Naofumi, and then it hit him. She had said those exact words right before the waves arrived, but he had been so buried in frustration that he let them pass without hearing them. She told him she was staying, and right there, her true grown-up form came into full view as she asked to remain by his side. They held each other close, and for once, Naofumi had no argument left to make. Motoyasu watched all of this and was still convinced that Raphtalia was under a spell, but Itsuki looked at him and told him he had an AQ of a goldfish. The following morning, Raphtalia brought Naofumi some leftover food from the castle kitchen. He took a bite, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he could actually taste it. She then explained that her clan aged roughly 4 times as fast as an ordinary person, matching their leveling speed, and that was why they were considered inhuman. In some fancy room far from all the drama, a mysterious woman sat back and listened, while her spy ran her through everything happening with Naofumi and the royal family. She was not exactly shocked by the king's behavior, and already had her money on Princess Mine being the brain behind most of it. Hearing that Naofumi had picked up an ally in Raphtalia made her feel a little better about things, but she quickly shifted her attention back to her own territory and the neighboring countries. She told her spy to keep watching the capital because, with the way these hero summonings were going, things were about to get a lot messier. Back at the royal court, the heroes all showed up to collect their rewards for surviving the wave and running errands for the crown. Everything was going smoothly until the king decided to announce, completely out of nowhere, that Naofumi's reward was being used to cover the cost of freeing Raphtalia from her slave contract. Itsuki and Ren were not having it. They pushed back immediately, pointing out that Naofumi had never actually lost the duel, and that the king himself had broken his own rules by letting Mine interfere. Mine jumped in to defend her father, claiming Naofumi had cheated by using Halloween-looking monsters in the fight. Itsuki and Ren shut that down fast, reminding everyone that she had cast a spell mid-duel to sabotage Naofumi. Ren also made sure to mention that Naofumi's performance during the wave had been genuinely impressive and had saved a lot of lives, so the bare minimum he deserved was proper payment. None of it moved the king. He sat there looking unbothered, but eventually he begrudgingly handed Naofumi the original 500 silvers he had been promised. The king then dismissed him like he was a waiter who had overstayed his welcome. Naofumi barely got a word in before Raphtalia stopped him and turned to leave. Naofumi followed without hesitation, and the two walked out while the royals stood there looking annoyed about it. They headed straight to the slave trader, where Raphtalia asked to have her slave crest restored. To her, it was not just a mark on her skin, but a sign of the trust between her and Naofumi, and she quietly hoped he would take the hint and start seeing her as more than just a travel companion. But Bro was slow and did not take the hint at all. While absorbing the ritual ink into his legendary shield, he unlocked a slave series feature that boosted Raphtalia's stats every time she leveled up. He turned down the slave trader's offer to buy Raphtalia back, and then his eyes landed on a monster egg raffle nearby. For 100 silvers, he could win a random egg, with the worst case being a Philolial suitable for travel, and the best case being a dragon egg worth around 20 gold pieces if raised properly. The trader threw in a special package deal covering both the slave crest and the egg raffle, and Naofumi took it. He then stopped by the medicinal shop where the owner, grateful that Naofumi had helped protect his family during the wave, handed him an intermediate book on potion crafting for free. Going through the books, Naofumi quickly ran into a problem. His shield translated spoken language just fine, but reading was a completely different situation. Raphtalia suggested they study the language and magic together, especially since they had over a month before the next wave hit. They decided to stay the night, and by morning, their monster egg had hatched into a Philolial. Thanks to Naofumi's newly unlocked Beast Tamer's shield, the creature grew into a full adult in just 2 days, and he named it Philo. Philo had barely settled into the group before Motoyasu showed up with a royal entourage and a decree naming himself the new lord of the village. His first move as lord was slapping a 50 silver tax on anyone entering or leaving, but Naofumi pointed out that a night at the inn with a full meal only cost 1 silver, making this tax roughly as reasonable as charging someone rent to walk through their own front door. The villagers agreed, and the tension started bubbling up fast. Just as Mine looked ready to send her royal knights in to flatten the growing dissent, a group of covert agents called Shadows stepped in and handed her a revised decree. The new terms called for a dragon race between Naofumi and Motoyasu, with the village's future on the line. Naofumi had zero interest in racing anyone, but Philo had already squared up against Motoyasu's dragon before he could say anything. Motoyasu, feeling generous, also promised Naofumi a reward if he somehow won. Before the race even started, Motoyasu decided to run his mouth at Naofumi and Philo, which turned out to be a poor life choice. Philo responded by kicking him directly in plot, launching him into the air. Later, as Philo bolted out of the starting line and immediately put a serious gap between them and Motoyasu's dragon. Then Mind's Knight started cheating, placing magical traps along the course and hitting Philo with debuff spells while boosting Motoyasu's dragon with speed enhancements. None of it was enough. Philo powered through every debuff. Naofumi navigated around every trap with his shield abilities, and they crossed the finish line first without breaking much of a sweat. Then, in a twist nobody was ready for, Philo transformed from her ostrich-like form into something that looked like a giant owl. Mind immediately tried to label this as cheating, but the shadows shut her down and flipped the table on her, instead revealing that the real cheating had been happening on Motoyasu's side the entire time. The magical traps had been specifically designed to target spell types that Naofumi and Raphtalia could not even use. Motoyasu's group quietly disappeared after that, taking their dignity with them. For his reward, Naofumi skipped the money entirely. Given the rumors that had been following him around, the last thing he needed was people saying he had robbed a village blind. Instead, Philo picked out a slightly damaged wagon that had survived the last wave, and Naofumi was handed a merchant's pass that got him out of paying tolls. The idea of becoming a traveling merchant lit him up in a way that royal rewards never had. They set off, but it did not take long to discover that Philo's incredible speed came with a side effect. Raphtalia spent most of the journey looking like she was about to pass out, so they made camp early to let her recover. The next morning, he woke up to find that Philo had transformed into a small girl with blonde hair and angelic wings, staring at him and cheerfully asking him for breakfast. Erhard was just about to enjoy his sandwich in peace when Naofumi, Raphtalia, and a cloaked little blonde girl walked through the door. The girl mentioned she was hungry, and being a decent person, Erhard offered her a bite. She shed her cloak, revealed herself to be a Phalolial, and inhaled the entire sandwich in one go. Naofumi and Raphtalia caught him up on everything. Phalolial flocks apparently had royals hiding among them, ones capable of shape-shifting into human form. The slave trader had already fitted Philo with a high-grade slave crest, which had taken a very aggressive bite out of Naofumi's wallet. The next problem was clothes that could survive Philo switching between forms without shredding themselves apart every time she transformed. That was beyond Erhard's abilities, so he handed over a dress a previous customer had left behind and pointed them toward a local tailor. The tailor needed magic threads. Magic threads required a new crystal for the magic shop owner's spinning wheel, and the spinning wheel currently had no crystal. The magic shop owner did at least figure out that Philo had an affinity for wind magic before they ran out of options, so the group switched focus to recovering their losses. They loaded up some merchandise, hitched Philo to the wagon, and started running routes between towns. On the road, they came across a man sprinting like the ground behind him was on fire. He was trying to get medicine to his sick mother and was desperate enough to cut a deal on the spot. Naofumi left the wagon with Raphtalia, jumped on Philo's back, and got the man home in a fraction of the time it would have taken on foot. Once there, he used his medicinal skill to push the medicine past its normal limits, and the woman recovered. She paid them in food, and Naofumi headed back to rejoin Raphtalia without complaint. Over the following days, the group built a steady rhythm selling goods, offering medicines, and giving rides. Word spread fast enough that an accessory merchant named Hickwall pulled them aside to let them know Naofumi was now being described in conversation as a saint healer traveling with a divine carriage pulled by the god of domestic birds. The peaceful merchant life hit a wall when Raphtalia spotted a gang of thugs blocking the road ahead. Their leader laid out the plan in plain terms: rob the group and drag Raphtalia away with them. Naofumi, Raphtalia, and Philo stepped up without hesitation. The thugs then mentioned they had a class-upgraded bodyguard, and on top of that, they figured the guards would side with them over the widely disgraced shield hero without a second thought. Naofumi stored that information quietly and got to work. Raphtalia opened with magic to create a gap in their formation, and Philo followed by spinning a tornado through the group of bandits. Once the chaos settled, the thugs, now thoroughly rearranged, revealed that a rival merchant had tipped them off about Hickwall. Naofumi responded to their confession by feeding them to Philo. When the begging started, he calmly recycled their own words back at them and said he would spare their lives at least. He then had them lead the group straight to their base, where every stolen item was returned without argument. The merchant responsible for the whole situation also paid extra for the trouble, whether he wanted to or not. That same merchant, rather than holding a grudge, was visibly impressed by how the whole thing had been handled. He opened up his network of contacts and offered his craftsman skills as goodwill. Naofumi walked away knowing how to refine metals, craft items, and enchant gems, along with a solid foundation in magical knowledge. The network also came stocked with rumors about the other heroes. Motoyasu had ended a famine somewhere by planting a legendary crop. Ren had been tearing through monsters in the southeast and had brought down a dragon. Whatever Itsuki had been doing remained a complete mystery to everyone in the network. The merchant also handed Naofumi a letter of recommendation, giving him access to mines for ores and gemstones. Using it, he tracked down the location of the magic gem needed for Philo's transforming clothes and set out with the magic shop owner toward a cave sitting beside an abandoned temple. Inside, they found a treasure chest that had already been emptied. An inscription inscription in an ancient language warned against opening it or taking the seeds it had once contained. A quiet, uncomfortable feeling settled over the group as they pushed further in. The cave responded almost immediately. They started hearing each other's voices saying things nobody had actually said out loud. Raphtalia's voice rang out with resentment about being treated as a slave. Phaelo's voice said things that made the air in the cave feel heavier. The magic shop owner cut through it before things could spiral, explaining that the cave's monsters copied voices and fed people their own private thoughts as bait, trying to crack the group from the inside out. Once the trick was understood, the illusions lost their grip, and Philo swept the creatures away with her wind magic. Deeper in, a beast picked up Raphtalia's trail by sound and started closing in. Naofumi activated his voice-dampening shield, channeled Phaelo's voice through it like a weapon, and hit the creature with a wall of sound that left it staggering. Raphtalia's sword, Phaelo's kick, and a burst of fire magic finished the job. They collected the crystals and returned to the magic shop, where the owner used Philo's own mana to spin the magic thread for her clothes. Naofumi tallied everything up: the clothes, the high-grade slave crest, all of it stacked on. Top of the original 100 silvers spent acquiring Philo, landing at a grand total of 340 silvers. He turned to Philo with the expression of a man presenting a perfectly itemized bill, and made it very clear that she had earned herself a long future of hard work. Following this, based on the tip Hickwall gave them, Naofumi and his team headed to a village to sell herbicide. When they arrived, they found the place overrun by aggressive vines covered in fruit, and the chief wasted no time explaining how things got that bad. Apparently, Motiyasu had tried to fix a famine by planting a bioplant seed, which at first produced edible plants just fine. But after he left, those same plants mutated into monsters and started turning parasitic, infecting the villagers in the process. A group of adventurers had gone in to uproot them and never came back. Philo swooped in and rescued those adventurers, which was already impressive enough, but then she went ahead and dropped another surprise by speaking out loud, announcing that Naofumi was the savior of the heavenly fowl. After healing the villagers, Naofumi agreed to finish what the adventurers had started. He scolded the villagers for being reckless before collecting payment for the treatment and an advance for the extermination job, then stepped up and made his role as the shield hero known. The attack on the bioplants did not go smoothly at first. Raphtalia and Philo kept stumbling into each other and landing in ridiculous situations, leaving Raphtalia annoyed and Philo grinning about it. Naofumi, however, figured out that his shield-enhanced abilities were the most efficient way to apply the herbicide, so he took point, poured the herbicide directly onto the original bioplant's core, and destroyed it on the spot. To make sure nothing like this ever happened again, Naofumi ordered the team to collect the seeds. As they gathered them, his legendary weapon unlocked various shields, and with that came the ability to analyze and modify the plants themselves. He spent the night unsealing his new shield powers and got to work, making key changes to the plants that limited their ability to mutate, while also controlling how fast they grew and how much they produced. When he tried to trade the modified seeds back to the village, the locals were not having it. Still shaken from the last disaster, they swapped all their unmodified fruit for his seeds instead, which at least guaranteed no more chaos and kept the profit flowing. Finding the village a tough crowd to deal with, Naofumi quickly turned around and sold the modified seeds to Hickwall for a solid amount. Hickwall then handed them another job, a package delivery to an inn near a hot spring. They wrapped it up, pocketed some coin, and decided to spend the night there. That was when Raphtalia's frustration with Philo started showing. Philo kept sticking close to Naofumi at every turn, and even got him to brush her hair, which did not sit well with Raphtalia at all. No matter how hard she tried to get a moment with him or picture their future together, Philo was always right there in the middle of it. Then Raphtalia overheard people talking about a rare material called ladium, something that could be used to craft an accessory tied to feelings of love. She saw her opening. When night fell, she quietly slipped out to track it down. She found out that a bird called the Gagoku collected the ore, and that the best bet was to find one of their nests. What she did not know was that Philo had the exact same idea, except Philo wanted a Gagoku egg to prove she was the better match for Naofumi. The two ended up racing each other to the nest, and Philo's stamina and powerful legs gave her a strong early lead, but her habit of fooling around got the better of her, and she tumbled right off a cliff. Raphtalia went after her to help and fell too, and together they landed in the path of a boar-like creature called the Silver Razorback. They managed to escape, and somewhere between running for their lives and catching their breath, actually bonded a little. When they finally made it to the nest and tried to grab what they came for, the Silver Razorback showed up again and smashed the eggs, sending the ore scattering everywhere. Both girls turned their frustration straight onto the boar. They dragged it back to town, sold it to the villagers, and used the earnings to buy crafting tools for Naofumi, which he appreciated but never realized they were doing this so they could clap him in the future. After expressing their thanks, Naofumi suggested they wash up at the hot springs. Even though they got treated like little kids, the group agreed to keep pushing forward with their master. The next morning, as they prepared to move out, Naofumi caught a merchant nearby talking about how medicines were flying off the shelves in the East Village. He decided that was their next stop. That night, he kept himself busy crafting accessories, putting together a bracelet for Raphtalia and a hair clip for Philo. Before they could even hit the road the following morning, an old woman and a young boy showed up with bad news. A deadly plague had swept through their village, and no medicine was touching it. Once they arrived, Naofumi did what he always did, treating the sick, collecting payment, and keeping things moving. He knew he was only dealing with the surface of the problem though, and the village doctor soon filled him in on the real source of the trouble. A dragon had been slain by Ren about a month earlier, earlier, and instead of properly disposing of the body, it had been left on the mountain as a tourist attraction. That decision aged terribly. The rotting corpse started pumping poison into the wind, blowing down into the village, and the local monsters caught the worst of it, mutating into aggressive, poison-spewing creatures that made the mountain a no-go zone for regular adventurers. To top it all off, the kingdom's knights and the other heroes brushed the whole thing off, promising more medicine while doing absolutely nothing useful. Now Fumi felt sick that Ren had been reckless by not cleaning up the dragon after defeating, and he told the doctor it must have slipped Ren's mind since he still saw the world as merely a game. However, now Fumi stepped in. He got the guild to drop the original request, then negotiated to handle the problem himself for 5,000 silvers. This made the doctor's assistant call him a money grubber, and not in any way a hero, but Bro gave her the shocker that he never introduced himself as a hero anyway. He was not about to let anyone treat him like a charity worker. He buffed Philo up, and they charged straight up the mountain, cutting through monsters on the way. When they finally reached the dragon's remains, things took a turn nobody was expecting. The corpse suddenly reanimated and rose up as a zombie dragon. Naofumi told them to flee immediately, but Philo, driven by the natural hatred that existed between Philolials and dragons, launched at it immediately. Seeing this, Naofumi thought they might have a chance of beating it anyway, and while he tried urging Raftalia, who was feeling sick from the whole traveling thing, the undead beast suddenly swallowed Philo whole, leaving them shocked. That was the last straw for Naofumi, as he instantly remembered all the beautiful memories he had had with Philo. He wondered if this world was taking something precious to him again, and his rage started to hit the roof. A glitched message flashed before him, asking if he wanted power and whether he hated everything. Images of Mine, King Ultra, and the other heroes rushed through his mind, and something in him snapped. He approached the dragon and absorbed its attack and let the rage shield take over, with flames wrapping around him as he raged at the creature. He was already going berserk when he suddenly heard Raftalia's voice telling him she believed in him. This instantly pulled him back from the edge, and he wondered what the heck he was doing. However, the damage was already done as Raftalia had been poisoned by the dragon and burned by the energy of Naofumi's shield, and the zombie dragon was still standing. He tried healing her with her magic over and over, but it was not working, and in that moment, he wondered what to do, whether to continue using the power of the cursed shield, as this was the only way he could beat the dragon. But he immediately reconsidered this because losing focus meant the hatred would consume his mind, and at that point, there was no turning back. Then came the twist. The dragon suddenly collapsed, and Philo burst out of its stomach, having eaten through a magic crystal inside that powered it up. Naofumi asked where the crystal was, and the glutton replied that it was right in her stomach. But now that the threat was gone, Raftalia's condition was still serious. Even so, she insisted on helping clean up, before worrying about herself, and Naofumi let her. He took care of the dragon's remains, and the payment from the village went straight toward her treatment. The doctor made it clear that high-quality holy water was the only thing that could fully heal her, so he handed the money back to Naofumi to go get it. Later, Philo passed Naofumi a piece of the dragon's crystal, and he absorbed it into his shield, unlocking a mysterious power he had no way of using yet. The rage shield sat completely apart from the rest of his upgrade tree, hanging over him like a warning. He immediately felt sorry for being reckless back at the battlefront and wished he had done things differently, but Raftalia and Philo also apologized for their own shortcomings and expressed how much they genuinely cared. Naofumi responded with a small smile and felt embarrassed when the girls called him out that this was the first time they were seeing it. Just then, Raftalia, feeling frisky, asked him to spend the night with her, but Naofumi turned away and told her to read her Bible. As he got outside, he made a quiet but firm promise to himself that he would get stronger and that he would protect whoever believed in him. Days later, Naofumi, Raftalia, and Philo were in the middle of clearing out a monster-infested area for a hired job. Throughout the fight, Naofumi was concerned about Raftalia, who was still dragging herself through the aftermath of the zombie dragon's poison and its nasty curse. On their way back after the fight, Naofumi told them they were canceling their trip and returning the next day, as Raftalia's treatment should now be the priority. Several moments later, the group ran into an unexpected situation. A flock of Philolials had surrounded a nobleman's daughter named Melty, and as they drew close, the birds ran off immediately. Seeing this, Philo felt disappointed. She thought the birds were yummy, and their meat would be good for tasting, shocking Raftalia, who immediately said she must be high on crack to think birds of her species were yummy. Meanwhile, Philo and Melty clicked almost immediately because Melty loved Philolials, and they soon became friends. So Naofumi let the two hang out while he slipped away to handle some healing work at a nearby village. That evening, while Naofumi was tending to Raftalia's injuries, feeling sorry for causing the whole thing, Melty and Philo showed back up. Melty explained that she had gotten separated from her escort and needed help getting back to the castle town. Naofumi initially thought this was none of his business, but when Philo begged and he reasoned that he could cash in big with this, since Melty must be some spoilt billionaire kid, he agreed to take the job. However, what he did not know was that someone was watching from the shadows the entire time. The next day, as Naofumi and his group prepared to leave, the doctor and the villagers thanked him for helping them, but he told them to save their useless thank you and give him money instead. As the journey moved along, the group slowly warmed up to each other through shared meals and stops for Raftalia to rest. Then, during one of their camping breaks, as Naofumi and Raftalia talked in the middle of the night, they suddenly saw Melty's clothes on the ground beside Philo. This immediately raised the scary question of whether Philo had eaten her, considering Philo once described other Philolials as yummy. Philo woke up wondering what was going on, and fortunately she revealed that she was perfectly perfectly fine, sleeping without her clothes in Philo's warm, cozy feathers. Raphtalia felt this and eventually passed out too, which made Naofumi wonder if the feathers had some kind of sleep-inducing effect, since he had also once fallen asleep in them. The next morning, when they finally reached the castle town, Melty thanked Naofumi for helping her, but Bro was more concerned about the money and told Philo to follow her home to collect it. Then Naofumi and Raphtalia headed straight for the church to pick up the holy water she needed. The high priest greeted him with a smirk, casually bringing up the duel with Motoyasu like it was small talk. Naofumi brushed it off and asked directly for the strongest holy water available, which came at 1 gold coin. However, the church tried to slide him a watered-down fake instead, but Naofumi found out, and the priest rebuked the nun for being silly before telling her to go get the real thing. This whole interaction left a bad taste in Naofumi's mouth as he stepped out, but shortly after, a town guard started tailing him, so Naofumi told Raphtalia to split up and meet him at Philo's carriage. He barely shook the guard off before running straight into Motoyasu, who was already steaming and ready to attack. Naofumi wondered what the heck he was doing in the public space, and Motoyasu accused him of picking up another slave, Philo, and since she happened to be his type, he wanted to free her too. Motoyasu threw the first move right in the middle of the market, swinging wildly and missing Naofumi while wrecking everything around him instead. The whole area descended into chaos. Everyone started fighting as though they had been waiting for an opportunity to. The guard who had been chasing Naofumi tried to step in and calm things down, saying it wasn't the right place to fight, but Mind swept in and declared it a legitimate duel by the power vested in her by the crown, ordering her knights to surround them. Just then, Melty arrived with her own guards, shut the whole scene down, and laid into her sister Mind for throwing her authority around, while also giving Motoyasu a piece of her mind for the reckless behavior. The situation cooled off, and Raphtalia showed up with Philo shortly after. Motoyasu wasted no time trying to get close to Philo, but he soon became shocked as he discovered that Philo was the big fat bird Naofumi was riding. Philo transformed out of anger and launched a kick straight at Motoyasu's groin that completely destroyed the codpiece. While everyone processed what just happened, Naofumi spotted the knight vice captain from the earlier fight in Loot Village nearby, and the man gave the shield hero a respectful nod. Naofumi took Melty to the weapon shop afterward, where she dropped some useful information. She was actually next in line for the throne, and because her sister Mine had a reputation for misusing her authority, Melty actually had the power to override her royal decrees. She also made it clear that she genuinely had no idea Naofumi was the shield hero when they first crossed paths, but Naofumi thought this was all a cap and was not interested in hearing her out. His distrust of the royal family ran too deep, and he told her plainly that her royal ties were enough reason for him to keep his distance, before asking her to get her ugly, scheming little self off his face. Around the same time, Melty got urgently called back to the castle by her father. On her way there, she remembered a task her mother, the queen, had given her, which was to return to the capital and confront the king about how badly he had been treating the shield hero, since the queen had not been able to do it herself at the time. Back at the shop, Naofumi told Philo to stay away from Melty, and Philo ran off crying while Naofumi sat with his thoughts about the king and Melty. Shortly after, a group of young knights and demi-human sorcerers walked into the shop and said they wanted to join Naofumi's party for the next wave. They specifically wanted to fight under him and not the other heroes, as they all came from the village where the previous wave had hit. Naofumi recognized the leader as the same guard who had once chased him down, and another as someone who had fought alongside him during the last wave. They had figured out that joining a hero's party was the fastest way to get transported to the wave location. Naofumi agreed to let them in, but on one condition. They each had to pay 150 silvers for a special accessory he had crafted, which also served as their entry fee into the party. They promised to come back once they had the money. After that, Naofumi and Raphtalia headed to Erhard's shop to get their armor upgraded. While the work was being done, Naofumi asked Erhard about the stars appearing next to Philo and Raphtalia's names on his status screen. Erhard explained that the stars meant they had both hit the level cap and would need a class upgrade at the red hourglass of the Dragon's Era before they could keep leveling. Naofumi brought it up with his companions afterward. Raphtalia said she was fine leaving it to him, but Naofumi told her this was a big decision, one she needed to think about carefully, especially considering her future once he eventually returned to his own world. That last part stopped Raphtalia cold. They made their way to the church to get the class upgrades done, but the nun hit them with a ridiculous price of 15 gold each. Naofumi noticed the smug look on her face and decided to play along, handing over the money for Raphtalia's upgrade without a word. Then another nun showed up and announced there had been a mistake, producing a royal decree that flat out banned Naofumi and his entire party from receiving class upgrades anywhere in the kingdom. Naofumi walked out fuming. He went straight to the slave trader who had been doing great business ever since word spread that he supplied top quality party members to the shield hero. Naofumi demanded to know how the man managed to get class upgrades for his slaves. The trader told him he could not offer that service himself, but other countries might. He suggested shield freedom as an option, though Naofumi quickly realized there was no way he would make it there and back for the next wave. The trader then recommended selling wyvern claws as a way to power up Philo's combat ability in the meantime. Since they could not use live monsters for testing, the slave trader pointed them toward a monster problem brewing in the Melromark sewers that needed handling. The group headed into the capital's sewer system and made quick work of the crocodile-type creature living down there before calling it a night. Later, while Raphtalia was being treated for her curse, she told Naofumi she wanted to follow him back to his world once the waves were over. Before the conversation could go any further, Philo came barging in. With With both Raphtalia and Philo unable to gain any more levels, Naofumi shifted his focus entirely to wave preparation, which meant stocking up on medicine and scouting out areas where the next wave was likely to hit. During one of his merchant runs, Naofumi passed through a northern town and got stopped at an unexpected toll gate, despite carrying a valid merchant pass. He also ran into refugees from a neighboring country who were begging for food and offering whatever they had in exchange. It came out that Melremark had sent adventurers to help a resistance movement against a cruel king in that country, but the situation had only gotten worse, especially with the wave closing in. Naofumi made sure the starving refugees were fed before heading back to the castle town. With just over a day left before the wave, Naofumi's group sat down for a meal at a restaurant and ended up overhearing Ren and Itsuki at another table, complaining about someone swooping in on their quests and taking their rewards. Itsuki had just received a guild quest about a northern lord who was squeezing his people dry with outrageous taxes and then using that money to fund mercenaries to keep everyone quiet. Naofumi nearly choked on his drink, which caught Itsuki's eye. Itsuki jumped to the conclusion that Naofumi had been the one impersonating them, and Naofumi wasted no time setting both him and Ren straight. He laid it out clearly. The country Itsuki had supposedly saved was now drowning under even heavier taxes, and Ren's decision to go dragon hunting had quietly started a plague. People had died because of what those two had done, and when Ren spotted the injuries on Raphtalia and figured out where they came from, it hit him hard. Naofumi told them both to stop making things worse and walked out. Itsuki was not convinced, but Ren took the words to heart. Back at the weapon shop, Naofumi picked up his newly upgraded armor, now built around the zombie dragon core and fitted with an auto repair function. Right on time, this bunch of pygmies showed up with the 150 silvers Naofumi had asked them to pay, but Naofumi gave them an accessory he had made, told them to spend whatever money they gathered in getting new gear, as he wasn't about to see his teammates dropping during battle. He then gathered everyone together and ran through the plan for the upcoming wave. By the following day, everyone was geared up and ready for battle. Naofumi had stocked enough medicine to handle the wounded, and before heading out, he slipped a custom bracelet onto Raphtalia's wrist, telling her it was loaded with a spell to boost her mana. She smiled and said she liked it. Philo, not one to be left out, threw a fit about wanting something too, so Naofumi pinned a special hairpin onto her and explained it would sharpen her speed. The young soldiers showed up shortly after. Naofumi registered the squad for teleportation and warned them that they would all vanish together the moment the waves hit. Right on cue, the timer ticked down and they disappeared. They landed in a new village, only to find that the waves had already beaten them there. Two knights had managed to cut down a monster before it could take out a villager, and for a second, it looked like the worst was over. Then a monster lizard lunged at them out of nowhere, but Raphtalia carved it up while Philo finished it off with a series of kicks and it dropped dead on the spot. That was when they spotted an older woman in the middle of the chaos, throwing hands with monsters like it was nothing. Once she wrapped up, she thanked Naofumi for saving her life earlier, and he recalled giving her one of his healing potions. She booted another monster aside and told them she was an adventurer, adding that wiping these creatures out was practically a warm-up exercise for her. Naofumi started wondering how much longer this was going to drag on when the lead knight stepped in and suggested he find a way to shut the waves down entirely, for the village was reduced to rubble. The old woman told them not to worry, promising to hold the village together while they moved. Naofumi and the girls took off running toward the portals and spotted a ghost ship looming in the distance. Nearby, Itsuki and his partner were busy clearing out the surrounding monsters. When Naofumi asked where the other heroes were, they pointed him toward the ghost ship. Philo immediately launched herself onto the vessel and climbed even higher to give everyone a bird's eye view of the situation. Right before their eyes, Ren sliced through the skull captain, but the thing just shook it off and came right back swinging. Ren and Motoyasu ended up bumping into each other mid-battle, and Ren suggested they focus on taking the captain down first. Motoyasu disagreed and said he wanted to go after the Kraken instead, convinced it was the only way to draw out the Soul Eater, which was the real force driving the waves. Before anyone could settle the argument, Naofumi dropped in on both of them. Motoyasu was not exactly thrilled to see him and told him to get lost. Naofumi ignored that and pointed out that the only way to stop the monsters from endlessly respawning was to shut down the waves at the source. He stepped in and knocked the captain back, telling them that they were supposed to be fighting as a team. Naofumi pulled up the captain's stats and started thinking about how to lure the Soul Eater out without finishing off the zombie. Then he caught sight of its shadow and told Raphtalia to hit it with her light magic. She cast the spell, and as the bright light exposed the shadows crawling across the deck, Naofumi gave the order. She drove her blade through it without a moment's hesitation. A spirit flame shot up into the sky, and Ren wasted no time stabbing another shadow as more flames followed. It did not take long before they realized the whole ship was crawling with Soul Eaters. One by one, the spirits rose and merged into a single towering dimensional Soul Eater right above them. Everyone stared at the thing and started quietly questioning whether they could actually bring it down. Ren, Itsuki, and Motoyasu threw everything they had at it in a combined assault, but the creature did not even flinch. Naofumi, seeing they were getting nowhere, told Philo to let loose her wind magic. However, the Soul Eater brushed it off and started charging up its own attack. Ren and Motoyasu rushed straight at it, which Naofumi thought was a terrible idea. He threw himself in front of Raphtalia and Philo just as the blast tore through the ship. Then the creature started winding up something even bigger, something that looked like it could wipe them all out in one shot. Philo tapped into a new power and started hammering the creature from every direction, pulling its focus away from the others and throwing off its aim completely. Raphtalia moved in to strike while Philo kept pounding it, dodging its jaws by the narrowest margins each time. Naofumi could see the monster's life ticking down, and for the first time, he thought they might actually pull this off. But the village was running out of time. Desperate to end it, he told Raphtalia he was going to unleash his rage shield and try to finish the thing in one go. She looked at him and reminded him that she was his sword, and that she would follow him no matter where he went. He summoned the rage shield, and the energy started pouring through him. Inside his mind, he could feel the dragon's soul stirring within the shield, and as a growth skill activated, his shield and armor surged in power while the dragon's fury burned through him. The other heroes watched his transformation and started wondering if he had made some kind of deal with the devil. As he attacked, Mine watched from the side and started telling everyone that Naofumi was a dangerous wildcard who had no business calling himself a hero. At that moment, the pirate captain and the Kraken came charging at Naofumi from behind. Ren cut down the pirate with his crimson blade, and Itsuki blasted the Kraken with his thunder shot. Motoyasu finally accepted that they had no shot at this alone and agreed to jump in. Naofumi broke away from the monster to create an opening. They all moved in at once, and Motoyasu drove his spear straight through it. Even then, the Soul Eater dragged itself back up like nothing happened, seemingly impossible to put down for good. Back inside his mind, Naofumi kept wrestling with the rage threatening to consume him. Then, Raphtalia appeared beside him in that space and told him plainly that she believed in him. The fury dissolved on the spot. Right then, a new skill was unlocked, and he trapped the creature inside a shield prison. Then, he summoned the Iron Maiden, which appeared above them, swallowing the shield prison whole. The monster plunged into the void and did not come back. With it finally gone, Naofumi collapsed from exhaustion. But before he could catch their breath, he sensed something off nearby. Another Soul Eater materialized in front of them, and Ren muttered that this was not in the script. The creature opened up and came for them, but before it could reach anyone, a storm of light arrows rained down and shredded it instantly. A woman descended before them, clearing every last trace of the monster from the air, and declared that Naofumi was the only one among them who had truly earned the title of hero. She introduced herself as Glass and declared that she was their enemy. Naofumi used his appraisal skill on her and discovered she was a high-ranking fighter, which made him privately doubt their chances against her. Glass, however, was eager for a fight and told him to send his slaves into battle. The other heroes took offense at her words, and Motoyasu charged forward alongside them, unleashing a powerful combined attack that should have put her down for good. But when the smoke cleared, she did not have a single scratch on her. She asked if that was all they had, then cast a reverse spell that sent a mighty wind tearing through all of them, leaving everyone stunned and Naofumi as the last one standing. Refusing to go down, Naofumi drank a soul-soothing potion to recover his stamina, and then trapped Glass inside a shield prison. She shattered it almost immediately, swiftly blocked Raphtalia's attack, and tossed Philo aside before casting a wind spell. Naofumi managed to pull Raphtalia out of harm's way, and serpents flew out to restrain Glass momentarily. At his command, Philo launched a relentless assault, but Glass swatted her away without breaking a sweat. Raphtalia then moved in to finish things, but Glass destroyed her sword in one motion and prepared a new attack. Naofumi quickly called both of them to his side and raised a shield prison around them, managing to weather the storm of her attacks until he finally passed out from the strain. Even then, Glass was impressed. She told him that he had done well and asked when he planned to use his rage shield. Taking the opening, Naofumi summoned his dark power with Raphtalia's support, and the energy spilled over into Philo as well, filling her with the same fierce rage. Philo charged forward immediately and aimed a powerful kick at Glass, but Glass caught her mid-strike and threw her aside like she weighed nothing. Naofumi pushed forward, but a wind spell brought him to a halt, and flames burst around him shortly after. Glass put out the fire without flinching and told him his flame was far too weak to concern her. To make her point even clearer, she launched a shell cracker that punched clean through his shield and destroyed his armor. Naofumi still refused to fall, and Glass actually seemed intrigued, telling him that he was truly worthy of the title Shield Hero and urging him to bring out everything he had. Taking her up on that, Naofumi bound her in another shield prison and summoned the Iron Maiden, locking her inside and sealing it shut. She broke out of it instantly and landed back on the deck without missing a beat. Then the ship began to rock, and Glass realized the wave was nearly over. Deciding she needed to wrap things up, she told them that the only way to end the war was to finish them off right there. As she prepared her final attack, Raphtalia released a burst of blinding light that threw off her aim long enough for the three of them to escape on Philo. But the moment they put some distance between themselves and the ship, a storm of light arrows came raining down on them. Naofumi threw up an air shield to knock them aside, and then Glass launched a glowing light sword from the ship. He caught it with his shield and managed to redirect it toward the mountains. Realizing she could not close the deal before the wave ended, Glass promised to wipe them out the next time they met, then ascended into a portal and vanished. The waves faded shortly after, and the ghost ship came crashing into the mountain. Raphtalia, still shaken, quietly wondered whether their village had made it through. Back in the village later that day, Naofumi noticed that a countdown had appeared in the system just before the wave ended, and it left him with more questions than answers about why the waves existed at all. One thing was clear: they needed to grow much stronger before the next one arrived. He also found himself thinking about how to upgrade Raphtalia and Philo to a higher class, now that the Soul Leader skill had been added to his shield. Before he could think too long about it, two knights showed up and told him the king had summoned him to the castle. Inside the castle, the king told Naofumi that he had watched the entire fight through a crystal ball, and that he deserved some recognition. Naofumi was not moved by that at all, considering he had basically been dragged there in the first place. The king then shifted gears and demanded to know how Naofumi had become so powerful. castle. Tired of the whole conversation, Naofumi told him to get on his knees and ask properly if he wanted answers. The king did not take that well and ordered his knights to surround him. Naofumi made it clear that he was not intimidated and told them they were picking a fight they would not enjoy, then turned to leave. On his way out, the king threatened to go after Raphtalia and Philo to make Naofumi pay. That one actually got under his skin. He turned back and told the king in no uncertain terms that touching either of them would be a serious mistake, as he wouldn't mind frying his eggs and drying him out in open air, then walked out. As he made his way through the castle, a woman stopped him and told him he was becoming a force to be reckoned with, then warned him to watch his back around new enemies. Would Naofumi be able to take this strange, powerful woman? If you enjoyed this, then comment SHIELD. Also, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. See you on the next one. Bye.